Hello there, greetings, and welcome all of you to the Prog Monster. My name is Murph, and I am the host of this channel. So we're here tonight, of course. We're doing a live stream. I haven't done one of these for a couple weeks now. They're difficult to do on the schedule I'm on, so that's part of the reason why I don't do them as much as I was doing. The other part is I just don't have the time to put in to actually do them on a regular schedule. But anyways, we're not here to discuss what I can and can't do. We're here to discuss what we are doing, which is talking about Black Sabbath. So there's a few things I wanted to bring up about Black Sabbath. Obviously, now that Ozzy has passed, that's probably the end for the band, more than likely. I can't see any avenue forward. But there may be one. You never know. There may be one that I don't see. You don't know what's going to happen, really. A lot of these bands, you think they're done completely toast and finito, and then they appear out of nowhere doing something that you didn't expect them to do, going on long tours and maybe producing albums, like some certain bands that I like are doing now. And so you don't know, Black Sabbath could do something. I'm actually kind of glad that they did that last concert in Birmingham, obviously without them even having to explain it or people even guessing about it. They did it because they knew Ozzy was getting to his final stages and they wanted to give him one last hurrah with the Black Sabbath people. And I'm glad they did it. It showed some class in doing so. So my history, we'll talk a little bit about my personal history. Sorry, just ate my supper and some of it's trying to escape. My personal history with Black Sabbath goes back to probably the mid 70s. When might even have been earlier. It might have been like 73 when my friend had that tape recorder, which his mother bought, and a small AM FM radio, one of those clock ones, like this big. And so this is how desperate we were for music then. We would play the clock radio, usually on the AM channel with whatever we could find. Probably, if I was honest about it and analyzed it properly, it was probably Chum AM, 1050 Chum AM. That's my guess in Toronto in 1973. And we would play the songs that we heard on Chum AM. And if we heard one we liked, we would move that cassette recorder right next to it and press record and play and tape that song. And then when we got a full tape, we would play that on the cassette. And you can imagine how great the quality was. It's all this clicking and channel changing like a transmission, right? And my friend used to call it his tranny. And so during that period of time, I believe he also had a phono player, which we would have called a record player back then. And his mother, who worked for Mattel, would bring us stuff home, usually cars, but sometimes like Hot Wheels. We would get the Hot Wheels or the plastic cars or whatever we would get. Every once in a while, she would bring one home, one of those K-Tel special records. And on one of these such records was a purple album. I remember it had a purple label on it. The album itself was your typical vinyl, but the label was a purple one. It was one of those K-Tel specials of the 70s or something. So she had this, she brought this one home, and on this album was, a number of songs, but the two that stood out were the April Wine, Ooh, What a Night, and the Black Sabbath, Paranoid. And that was our first kind of introduction to Black Sabbath. And it was the only song we heard, but like many people nowadays who only know that song, or they may know that song, War Pigs and Iron Man, that's about it, right? There's a lot of people like that out there, actually. But yeah, Paranoid, that was my introduction to them in 73. And For the longest time, that was the only Black Sabbath that I knew until 1980 when I bought the Heaven and Hell album when Ronnie James Dio was now in the band, and I bought the album. And I think primarily I bought the album because I knew Ronnie James Dio from Rainbow, which was the first album by Rainbow, which was Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, which is the one I've always referred to as the Man on the Silver Mountain album. Anyways, Ronnie was now in Black Sabbath, and I'll be honest with you, that was a huge jump in my interest in metal from that album. I started listening to it. I listened to that album a lot. It was probably one of my favorite albums of that year. My two favorite albums from two bands I loved: Black Sabbath's Heaven and Hell and Rush's Permanent Waves. Two huge albums for me that year. Anyways, then I started going back, as you know, and when the next album I bought, next Black Sabbath album I bought was Never Say Die, which also had a lot of history with me. Played that a lot, listened to that a lot in high school, and then started collecting the other Sabbath albums. You know, the debut, Paranoid, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, Volume 4. Those were the ones that I had, and Master of Reality, of course. Loved all of them, still do. And that's where my history kind of started with Sabbath. And Sabbath has been one of those bands, and there's not been many of them, that have persisted throughout the years. I still listen to them even during the 90s when it kind of got away from rock music a bit. I was still listening to Sabbath once in a while. Sabbath and Rush primarily were the two I listened to, and yes, during that time period. But and then they kind of started to make their comeback, like so many bands. Once my daughter was born, I started re-energizing myself, and I had a period of about 4 or 5 years where I was listening to a lot, kind of drifted again for a bit, and then came back to it with this channel. And I wanted to speak a little bit about the two particular albums, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So the first of the two I'll talk about is this one, Volume 4. So to me, this was kind of an outsider album. I kind of viewed this as being different. I didn't even know what the Volume 4 meant. Obviously, it means their fourth album. But back then, I wasn't sure. I thought maybe there was 3 other volumes just called Black Sabbath, like Volume 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they were all part of one collection. But obviously, that wasn't the truth. This album, produced by Patrick Meehan and Black Sabbath himself, 10 songs on it. A couple of songs here: Tomorrow's Dream, Supernaut. Both early favorites of mine. I listened to them when I would go to this album. So I think this album came, I think I went to the record store, and I'm guessing here, but I bought a bunch of albums all in one huff, one day. Spent about $300 on CDs because Sam's had a sale going on. This was in the 80s, or maybe it might have been in the 90s. Could have been the early 90s. It's either the early 90s or the late 80s, and I bought $300 worth of CDs. And I'm thinking these two Sabbath albums, or at least on CD, were in here. Volume 4, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, were 2 of the albums that I think were in there. Now, I did own these on vinyl. That's my original take on this particular album and those early Sabbath albums for me. And the thing I liked about this album is it was quite different. I found this very different from the first 3. To be honest with you, when you really look at those first half dozen Sabbath albums, they're all very different from each other. Yes, there's the arching over view of them is they're very heavy, all of them, but they all have some elements on them that are different. Like this one has Laguna Sunrise on it, which is a classical guitar bit. It's not something you would expect to see on a heavy metal album. And the same with Master of Reality having the that song. Sorry, can't think of the name of the song now. Oh, Into the Void. Yeah, very different from Sabbath. But those first two or three albums, very heavy, very deep, bluesy, but also very dark. You get to this album, and it's got quite a bit of different stuff going on. I'd almost say there's a fair bit of progressive stuff on this album too, and the next one even more so. But for me, this album has always been an outlier. The other albums everybody knew and liked. This one not known as much, but still fantastic album. I might rate this as my third favorite Sabbath album. Maybe fourth, probably fourth actually. Laguna Sunrise is a song that I've always liked, but I like everything here. And the thing is, I don't think this album was ever in my playlist. I think this one and Sabotage never really got a chance to go in the playlist, but this one, for some reason, I've listened to quite a bit over the years, even though it wasn't in my playlist. Wheels of Confusion, Tomorrow's Dream. Changes was a song that was very different for them as well. Kind of a ballad, I guess, by Sabbath. It's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird thing. But, you got things like Cornucopia and Snowblind, kind of very acidy, a little bit of an acid rock feel to them. And so I just wanted to talk about this album because I think it's a bit of an outlier and doesn't really, you hear them talk about Master Reality, Paranoid. Those are common talk about albums. Even Never Say Die for maybe the wrong reasons and their debut for the right reasons as well. Even Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, I see once in a while, but for some reason, this one doesn't get nearly the attention. And I think it's as good or better than all those other albums. The other album I wanted to talk to about was this one, Mob Rules. I hate to say it, when this came out, I was a little disappointed because I wanted another Heaven and Hell, and this is a little different than that. In the long run, this might actually be a better album. You had The Mob Rules, Turn Up the Night, and Voodoo all singles from the album. And I liked them all initially. I don't really care much for those ones as much now. I prefer some of the other songs like Sign of the Southern Cross, Country Girl, Falling Off the Edge of the World. To me, these are all the better tracks on the album. Even Slipping Away is kind of in between the two of them. I did like it initially, got away from it, kind of still like it. But this was produced by Martin Birch as well. I just think this album is kind of the opposite of Volume 4. It got a lot more attention than Heaven and Hell, which bothered me a little bit because I think Heaven and Hell is a better album. But the artwork on this is quite superior, and this does have some absolute killer songs. This is also the album, I think, that was featured. The song Mob Rules was featured on the movie Heavy Metal, which was out around the same time that this album came out. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that album and this album because of that. Yeah, forgive me. I've been working hard all day and I'm just having a hard time staying awake now. But so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Really a classic kind of album. A couple of other things I wanted to talk a little bit about. So I saw Sabbath in, I'm going to say 82, possibly. Yeah, it was probably 82. I think it was 82. I'm just looking for the date on this. I saw it this tour. I think it was 82. And of course, like so many great albums of the modern era, they tell you nothing. Okay, so I believe this was an late 81, yeah, late 81 album. And I saw them in the winter of 82, I believe. And the significance of that is that my head rang for 3 days because back then nobody thought about putting plugs in your ears to protect them. I just went to the concert and put up with the loudness of the thing, and my head rang for 3 days, and I couldn't hear, and I became very worried that I wasn't going to be able to hear anymore, and that I wouldn't be able to listen to music. So um, I started getting this idea that maybe I didn't really want to do any more concerts at the Gardens. That was my first inclination. And then the next year in 83, I went to see Ronnie James Dio, and I believe it was Metallica and Anvil that were the backup bands. If I could be wrong here, I know Anvil was one of them, and I'm pretty sure Metallica was the other one, but I might be wrong. Anyways, another extremely loud concert that I saw at Massey Hall. And again, I had the same ringing, and I told myself that was going to be it. Now, of course, it wasn't. I went to a couple more concerts after that. I want to say I seen Ian Gillan and Black Sabbath, but I don't really recall anything about it. I had this feeling that we went to see it, but I don't recall anything about it, so I can't really tell you anything about it. So perhaps I'm just imagining it. So, anyways, after about 1984, I stopped going to concerts. So I had about a 6 or 7 or maybe even 8 year window where I went to quite a bit of concerts, and then I stopped because of the hearing issue. And I went to one other concert in 1990. It was Elton John in New Zealand, but it hardly was even close to the kind of loudness. And then I'd not been to see any really loud concert or stadium going concerts. I've been to some small venues to see different bands. Saw Rick Spider in Grand Bend. Saw my cousin, her now Voyager, back in 1990, and in Mississauga at the Roadhouse. Saw a few other like that kind of stuff, but nothing of substance at the Gardens or anything like that. Again, I don't know that I would care to do it much anymore. First of all, I don't think most of these bands are really up to it anymore, and the cost is somewhat prohibitive. So, anyways, but that's the significance of Sabbath for me on that particular. Is they're the ones that kind of made me aware of my hearing. And so the other thing about Sabbath is once Dio died, I thought that was it. And then they came back with Gillan, which came back with a fantastic album. But after Gillan left the band, I kind of lost interest because it was around the same time as I was moving away from the music industry altogether. Kind of lost interest in Sabbath. So I never really followed the Tony Martin era. I'm only now starting to get into that. I did enjoy the last album that Sabbath put out, 13. I think it's very good. Very kind of similar to their debut album, but of course, better production, better sound, all that kind of stuff's better, but still got that doomy feel to it. And that's the big thing about Sabbath. I like that doom sound. So for me, that's those are the big things about Sabbath that I wanted to talk about. I'm sure that other people have things about them they would like to talk about as well. If you can leave that in the comment section if you wish. Anyways, I'm going to cut this short because I'm getting really tired, and but I wanted to do it at least make an attempt to do a live one. I may once I get a little bit more organized and I can work a little less, then I will maybe start doing a lot more live stuff because it gives people a chance to actually ask questions and gives me a chance to elaborate on stuff that I may or may not even know I'm thinking about. Anyways, thank you again for your support, and we will see you all again throughout the week. Take care. Have yourself a good evening, and goodbye here from the Prog Monster.